Welcome to the 8th video of the Using SEO to Market Your Website video tutorial series. This video covers optimizing your web pages for search engines. Now, when comparing the technical and marketing aspects of search engine optimization, web page optimization is probably the most technical part. So let's start by taking a look at how Flash, frames, and dynamic content play a role in SEO. Now with Flash, although it's aesthetically pleasing and cool, the truth of the matter is that Flash is a #1 rankings killer. This is because the engine crawlers cannot actually see the text or any of the content covered in the Flash movie. That limits what it uses to identify the website to only a few components, like the site title, for instance. So it's for this reason that any site that depends on search engine traffic should really avoid using Flash. Now for sites such as a recording artist's website or a movie website, the audience there knows what they're looking for. It's that specific movie, that specific audience. So this is the reason you see sites like that taking advantage of the advanced features that Flash can provide. Their competition for search engine rankings is quite minimal, and even still, they're not so heavily reliant on search engine traffic. Another big turnoff to search engine crawlers are frames, and this is one of the reasons you hardly ever see frames being used anymore. I'm personally very thankful for this, and I'm glad to see them go. But the reason for this is that frames are difficult for the crawlers to analyze. They can only see the path of what is in the source of a frame, and not what the sources actually consist of. Bottom line, don't use frames. Now it's also important to note with things like JavaScript or other code fragments. Crawlers usually ignore this code, so any links or text keywords inside that script code is going to be ignored. JavaScript, a lot of links have code tags before and after the link. And remember, links are one of the most important things for a crawler to look for. So you want to make sure that when you're using things like JavaScript, that you're not writing off any important sources for keywords. And lastly, there's dynamic pages. Now, these are pages that are automatically generated by a web application, such as a content management system. You can usually spot a dynamic page by looking at the URL and seeing any question marks or strange ID numbers that represent parameters and unique identifiers created by the web application. Now, as far as search engines are concerned, there's two reasons that dynamic pages can be a problem. One is that the page isn't always there to be crawled. Sometimes these pages are created on the fly, meaning when the user selects a certain option or is limited to certain visibility permissions. The second issue is that search engine crawlers may skip a page altogether if they see too many question marks or weird identifiers in the name. They won't consider them relevant to the root website. Now, if your website requires a dynamic structure, you can actually do something about this. There are plugins called URL rewriters that you actually apply to your dynamic backend, and essentially the idea behind a keyword identifier is to change the output name for a URL that is automatically created. So for instance, in a dynamic generated URL that uses the identifier cat, the URL rewriter would change that to category. As a result, a crawler sees a legitimate word in the URL and doesn't necessarily ignore the entire page. So where do we put all of these keywords that we put so much time and effort into researching and identifying? Well, of course, there's the body text, and this is where your keywords should kind of naturally place themselves. While you want to make an effort to include them, your body text is the everyday conversation aspect of your content. Now this is where a lot of your keyword weight should come from. If you have a web page about tires, then you're probably going to say the word tire quite a few times. Now as far as code is concerned, the title tag is quite important. The title tag is responsible for the title of your page, and it's what the browser displays in the upper portion. It's also going to be what a search engine uses for the title of your listing. With this, you want to make an effort to include some of your primary keywords. Think of it like a book in a library. If you were in the library looking for a book on photography, you would most likely pick up a book that has the word photography, photos, cameras, something along those lines in the title. Page headings are also important. These are what are confined in the heading tags H1, H2, for example. Now, page crawlers look at these because they identify special topics that are discussed in the content of the page. So going back to our book comparison, think of these as the chapter titles of the book. A chapter in a photography book that covers lighting angles would most likely have a chapter title that includes the word lighting. You want these headers to include keywords from your primary or primary variable keyword phrase for that page. Image alt tags are another great place for using keywords. These are the tags that identify an image, and when you mouse over that image in the browser, the caption usually pops up with whatever text is placed in the alt tag. Now these are important to the crawler because it tells it exactly what that image is there for. What content does it relate with? Why did they put it there? So for example, if you had a web page about boats with a picture of a boat in the middle, the crawler checks those alt tags to see if the images in the page really pertain to the other keywords it's finding in areas like the body text. So you want to make sure to include your page's keywords in those image alt tags. Also, don't forget that graphics such as your page header graphic or your company logo can also have alt tags. Now with alt tags, you want to take into consideration the file name of the image. We touched on file names earlier and how words in the file name can be associated with keywords. With that being said, not only do you want the image file names to appropriately reflect what that image is, but you want your image alt tags to complement those file names. So for instance, if you had an image called company name-logo.jpg, you would want your alt text to contain the company name. Links are another great place to use keywords, and crawlers check both the link URL and the text inside the URL tag. We'll discuss links in more detail in the next video. Now in optimizing your web pages, you want to take into consideration keyword precedence, or where your keywords exist in terms of other keywords on the page. A general rule of thumb here is that keywords at the top of the page are worth more than keywords at the bottom of the page. So keywords in the title are valued over keywords in a link in the middle of the page, or for example, keywords in the header tag of a page would be valued over body text beneath that header. Think of it like a newspaper. First you look at the section or page title to find out which section you want to read, and then you browse through the headings of the articles before you move on to reading the body text of that article. You don't read an entire article to find out what section you're in or what your article is about. This is the logic behind precedence in terms of the search engine crawlers. Next, you want to keep in mind your keyword weight. Again, keyword weight is the ratio of keywords to the number of words in that page. Overall, you want your weight to consist of primary and secondary keywords and keyword variables. If you have a web page about digital photography and the phrase video editing has a higher weight than digital photography, the crawler is not going to identify your page as being primarily about digital photography. Now note that you should not by any means spam your page full with keywords just to increase your weight. Crawlers can spot this from a mile away and will definitely penalize your rank for it. And finally, we come to meta description and meta keyword tags. Now, a common misunderstanding is that these meta tags are the end-all be-all of search engine optimization, when the truth is that they play a very small role in how you'll be ranked. It's just not that simple and easy as being able to come up with a great single tag and get high search ranks. Nevertheless, the meta description tag is a tag that should describe that page's content. A long time ago, these tags were used in the description of listings. Not so much these days. For instance, although Google looks at your meta description tag, the description tag is only one of several elements that Google uses to create its own description for your site. Nevertheless, when using meta description tags, you want to use keywords in that description that are consistent with the keyword theme for that page. As far as the meta keyword tag, which is a tag that once specified the keywords an engine could associate a site with, is borderline useless. The truth there is that most engines actually ignore the meta keywords tag altogether. So remember, meta description plays a minor role and meta keywords are practically useless. In the grand scheme of web page optimization, the single most important thing to remember is to focus on the 2 keyword phrases that most accurately describe the content of the page. This completes video 8 of the Using SEO to Market Your Website series.